to be led by Patricia Guy.
Good morning. So all who would care to, you can do this open-eyed or eyes closed, your choice. If you do open-eyed, if you do a slightly lower gaze, kind of down towards your feet, maybe as if you're looking at maybe 6 inches in front of your feet. And so we're going to begin with just 3 deep breaths, as if you're breathing all this wonderful clear air right into your heart. 3 deep breaths. 1, 2, 3, and now what I'd like you to do is take whichever hand is free, not holding coffee or whatever, and place it on your heart, just for a moment. And now I would like you to imagine that you're seeing before you some small child, infant, puppy, kitten, whatever image arises, that warm, tender place in your heart. See that? Maybe just like an image right before you. Now welcome that fragile, tender little being right into your heart. Now imagine you're seeing yourself as a baby, a small child, a little tender, wide open one, sitting in front of you. And allow those warm feelings to arise for you yourself as that small child, infant, tender, wide open little being. And now allow that one to come into the unified field of your heart. And rest there, safe in your own care. And now I'd like you to imagine concentric rings of rose-colored light radiating out from your heart like a pebble dropped in the center of a pond. And allow those ripples to include the people on either side of you, in front of you, behind you, until all those overlapping concentric rings create a pattern over this whole garden. And now from the center of your own heart, and imagining this is happening simultaneously with everybody else in the group, imagine those heart rings go from the center of your heart out through your feet into the center of the earth. And now imagine the earth receiving that loving attention from all of us. And now from the center of your own heart, in the center of each person around you, allow those rings to go up through your spine, through the top of your head, up into the trees, to the birds that are singing to us. And imagine them receiving that. And now let that continue to expand through the atmosphere, through the clouds, up to the stars, until the stars are receiving that pulse. And on the returning pulse, that light returns through you, through the clouds, through the atmosphere, through the birds, through the top of your head, back to your own heart. Now give your own heart a little rub as you open your eyes. And be thankful that you all chose to be here today. Thank you.
What is this thing called love? Presented by James Tipton. For more than a decade, he has been regaling us with his poetry and his entertainment and his wit and his intelligence here at Open Circle. And of course we love him, and he's here today to be with us on the Heart Day. He has published more than 1,000 poems, can you imagine? Stories, articles, and reviews in dozens of magazines and national anthologies. In addition, his work has been translated into at least 8 languages. Perhaps he is best known to Lakeside readers for his monthly column in the OHO, Hearts at Work. Please give a warm welcome to James Tipton.
Everything working? Is the mic on?
There it is.
Is it good enough? Good, good. Thank you very much, Kat. That was a great introduction, and I loved all those jokes. It fits in with one of my basic theories about love and our reactions to some of the real issues there. I was walking down a street in Ajijic a week ago, and a woman came up and said, "I see you're doing Open Circle." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I still remember 2 or 3 years ago when you started by playing Beethoven's Hymn to Joy on the harmonica, backpacker style." So, she then said she went home and memorized the first verse of Hymn to Joy, which she carries with her. We know enough people to sing that now. Let's sing that. Joyful. Let's sing it together. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee, opening to the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us with the light of day. All of us have had that melody in our blood almost from the time we were born. It's one of the world's most popular melodies. And that actually was the first use of choral music in a symphony, was Beethoven with that 9th symphony. And of course, when Beethoven is writing that symphony, he is what? Yeah. Stone deaf. And at the opening performance in Austria, this symphony he had poured his heart into, he stood in front of the orchestra while a conductor conducted it live. He stood in front of the orchestra. And when it was over, he continued standing that way and had no idea he was receiving 5 standing ovations. And then a young woman from the choir came up to him, put her hand on his shoulder, and turned him around to face the audience that were giving him these ovations. Nobody had ever received that many except royalty. And so, quite an event. I saw recently on YouTube 10,000 Japanese vocalists singing the Ode to Joy in perfect German for French television.
Well, you're in Mexico.
Yeah, and we're in Mexico. So, and I highly recommend that. Just go to YouTube and look up 10,000 singing Ode to Joy. The version we know is actually called Hymn to Joy, and it was written by Henry Van Dyke in English, maybe, I don't know what, 1915 or something. Margaret Van Every has that wonderful concha about the Ode to Joy. In the darkened hall, the stranger on my left holds my hand throughout the Ode to Joy, as husband dozes on my right. There's also a wonderful, Gary Oldman, Immortal Beloved. Have any of you seen that? Immortal Beloved. I highly recommend that too, Gary Oldman. And they do a good hunk of the Fourth Symphony in that, including that scene I just described at the end of the symphony. So, that is a very, very powerful piece of music about love. The third stanza actually ends with teach us how to love each other. Teach us how to love each other. Lift us to the joy divine. And so I'm going to talk about some of these things related to love and how we struggle to love each other. I titled my talk, what is this thing called love? You remember that old Cole Porter song? Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald, I think. Other people had that as one of their hits. Most songs in our lifetime, most popular songs by vocalists are about what? They're about love. And you would not find this probably 500 years ago or even 1,000 years ago, but most songs are about love in our time. They are so deep in our system that singers have signature love songs. For example, Whitney Houston is associated with what? I will always love you. Yeah, yeah. Many people have made versions of that, but that's the one she's associated with. Dean Martin is associated with what? Well, that's Amore. That's the one, but I'm thinking of another one. He's got 2 or 3. That's right. That's what I think of. Everybody loves somebody sometime. Everybody loves somebody sometime. And one of the lines there is, for you, your time, your sometime is now. Your sometime is now. That's the Dean Martin song. John Denver, I tend to associate with Annie's song, You Fill Up My Senses. You remember that song? Raise your hand if you remember that. Yeah, well, we're pretty much the same age group, I think. You fill up my senses. What? Like a night in a forest. Like a mountain in springtime. Like a walk in the rain. Like a storm in the desert. Like a sleepy blue ocean. You fill up my senses. Come fill me again. And it goes on. Come, let me love you. It's a beautiful song. These are so deep in our mechanisms for love and relationship that I can just give you a couple of notes or a couple of words and you can tell me the song. But you fill in. What's the rest of this one? I can't give you anything but love. All right. Good. You're the only one. How about this one? Since my baby left me. See, we're deeply encoded, are we not? It's down at the end of Lonely Street. Heartbreak Hotel. One my dad always liked because he taught my mother this name. If you knew Susie. Like I know Susie, oh, what a gal. And in church camp we had versions of it. If you knew Jesus like I know Jesus, oh, what a pal. There's none I favor like our dear Savior. Oh. Anyway, so these are keeping our moments. How about this one? I'll give you 2 words. And notes. If I love you, time and again I would try to say all I want you to know. How about this one? I'll be seeing you. These are planted so deep. These will be growing out of our coffins. These melodies and the sentiments behind them and the desires behind them are so deep in all of this. This desire, as Mother Teresa says, to love and to be loved is so deep in all of us that these are far more powerful than anything we memorized in college. You're nobody. God, what an audience. Very good. What? We're old. Yeah, I agree with you, Jim. I agree with you. But that's related to other things you'll say. Can't help falling. Yeah, there's another one. I'm thinking of the one, can't help falling in love. Yeah. They're going to voice that man and send him on his way. So these have stuck with us far more than the plots of Rambo or something. Stand by your man. Don't hear that one much anymore. Sure wish I did. We have the leisure in our time to fall in love. 1,000 years ago, people did not have the leisure to fall in love. They were struggling too hard to feed their family. And the time they had left, they spent building Gothic cathedrals and building these spires to reach up as high as they could toward heaven. Around the 12th century, they were building these spires so high that they began to what? Fall. The flying buttresses could not hold them. And crashed back down to earth. Very, very early symbol of what was going to become the Renaissance eventually. And so 1,000 years ago, and in other periods of time, God was hiding in cathedrals. And then she decides it's time to. I say, my but people looked for God in cathedrals, and that's where he was hiding. Even a few hundred years ago, even in the United States, God was hiding in theology, and the middle-class family, of all things, wanted to send their kid to a theology school, to divinity school. And the great schools were Harvard Divinity School, things like that. And so God was hiding in sacred texts. Everyone who, whether they had money or not, had one book in their house, which is what? The Bible. The Bible. They didn't know other book at all. And that Bible was read probably at least daily in most of those families. So God was hiding in sacred texts then. And how many of you have read the Bible in the past week? Aside from myself. Sorry. How many of you read the Bible this past week? No, just anything. Open it. 2 people. See, that's really different from 1690 asking that same question. Isn't that interesting? But everybody knew these songs. So, God was hiding in the sacred texts. In the last 200-300 years, and Beethoven is actually related in some ways to the Romantic movement, but in the last couple of hundred years, and particularly in the last 100, relationships have come to the fore as the place where God hides. So that is where we will find God in relationships. That's where God is hiding now. And so that creates lots of difficulties. Hey, how many of you have at least one book in your home about relationships? Most of us. So it's quite a change, is it not? God hiding in sacred text and not hiding in relationships. And we have all read books about relationships. So, in those relationships then, since that's where God hides in our time, in relationships then, we expect, at least unconsciously, our partner, referred to in one of Cat's jokes, to be what? To be God, yeah, or goddess. God is actually a neuter word. It's like man is neuter too. Women have a distinguishing term to behold.
Did you say neuter?
Neuter. Speaking of that, someone sent me an article that Playboy has stopped printing nudes in their magazines. Did you read that? They just have these dumb articles. Anyway. If people ever say to me, why do you read Playboy? I say, for the photos, you know. Yeah, I've heard so many times, oh, the articles are so great. Really?
Where are they?
Yeah. But at any rate, we expect our partner, all of us, because God hides in relationships, and we can say God is equivalent, but I'm just going to keep saying God, meaning both. Because God is hiding in relationships then, we expect the relationship to be our spiritual center somehow. And more often than not, the relationship instead becomes a great teacher, does it not? It becomes a great teacher and forcing us to examine ourselves over and over. It reminds me of some lines from Pablo Neruda. He says, when you are far away, I miss you so much. I love you so much that when you are here, I sometimes wish you would go far away so that I could have those feelings again. And of course, this tension gives rise to numerous jokes, and Kat delighted us with some of those. I grabbed a Reader's Digest on the way out just to see how common this thing was. And I opened it up to the jokes. Here we go. A frugal widow goes to the newspaper to take out an obituary notice for her late husband. How much, she asks the fellow behind the counter. $1 per word, he says. She says, make it McGregor died. The man says it's a 5-word minimum. She nearly faints, but collects herself. Very well, make it McGregor died. Volvo for sale. So these jokes abound in part because the relationship is never opening up the way we want it to, because God is hiding in it. In heaven there were 2 huge signs. The first read, men who did what their wives told them to do. The line of men under this sign stretched as far as the eye could see. The second sign stated, men who did what they wanted. Only one man stood under that sign. Intrigued, St. Peter said to the lone man, no one has ever stood under this sign. Tell me about yourself. The man shrugged and said, not much to say. My wife told me to stand there. This isn't about relationships, but I'm glad to listen to Tina Fey. It fit me so well. Tina Fey says, why are my arms so weak? I did that push-up last year for nothing. But at any rate, relationships, God hiding in relationships, relationships then become, in our time, our path toward the divine. And it'll go onto a page like it's long. I make a lot of this stuff up as they go along. So. Leo Buscaglia was a wonderful teacher of love. He was hired at the University of Southern California as professor of love, actually professor at large, to put together courses on love for the students in the 60s and 70s. Professor at large, and he taught courses about love. He wrote several wonderful books, one of them titled Love. He insisted that we must always remember there is no one in our lives who is here specifically to meet our expectations. There is no one around us in our lives who is specifically here to meet our expectations. Another idea I liked in Leo was the important thing is not to love somebody, but to become love itself. It's a very different thing. Let's try an experiment. I make this stuff up and see how this works. Turn to 2 or 3 people right now, strangers, partners, and with your lips say, Valentine's Day. I like doing that. Leo says, let's take that one step further, and rather than say, I love you, let's feel that we are love itself when we look at this person. So take a few seconds to touch into that space where you are love itself. I am love. And being love itself. Turn around again and look at these people. You don't have to say I love you. Just turn around and look at the people again, feeling that you are love yourself. Looks like nobody wants to stop, huh? But anyway, those are important things in my life to think about. Another thing Buscaglia said that I always remembered was, it doesn't really matter in a relationship who's doing the most loving. Isn't that an interesting thing? It doesn't matter who's doing the most loving in a relationship. So we hear in the Ode to Joy, teach us how to love each other. And getting rid then of all expectations has something to do with learning how to love and the idea of becoming love. Remember Eric Fromm wrote that wonderful book, what's the name of it? The Art of Loving, that's it, thank you. And Eric Fromm in that book says, we got to get rid of this notion of falling in love. Let's don't fall in love anymore. Let's rise in love. So when you leave today, keep that one idea in mind. I'm going to start rising in love instead of falling in love. Falling in love includes this sort of dark stuff that gets tangled up down below, I think. I think I'm going to, in the remaining hour and a half, I'm going to listen through some poems that are related. This is titled, If We Love Only One Person. If we love only one person, that is obsession and not love. If we love only one religion, one thing is certain, we are not religious. If we love only one house, we do not know what home really is. When we look deeply into the eyes of a stranger and think, this woman also is my wife, or this man also is my husband, then we are beginning to make some progress. And what about that old crone and that old derelict? Yes, they also are father and mother. Some days all the women in the world are wearing a single skirt and all the men fit into a single pair of shoes. On those days we no longer blame ourselves because it has taken us so long to learn to love. On those days we can say it is God who has made us crazy. This is bilingual and I was going to read a couple in Spanish, but I think I'll read those later. If I want to get through 40 of these, I got to get one. This is a true story. This actually happened to me. It's called The Day I Found God Washed Ashore. I base a lot of my poems on my own life. The day I found God washed ashore, he was barely breathing until I began to apply mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. For a few minutes, I was really worried. I thought I might have to help organize the funeral of God. But then, as I was breathing into him, he began breathing back into me. And finally, one eye, crusty with the sea, opened and winked. Before I could say a word, he transformed into a beautiful woman. And then into another beautiful woman. And then into another beautiful woman. And he has been doing that ever since. Every day of my life. Including this morning. That day, God washed ashore, unconscious and hardly breathing, was the day I really got serious about religion. Okay. What's all this talk about finding the right one? What's all this talk about finding the right one? It is all very simple. God hid a woman inside each man, and God hid a man inside each woman. And so to you men, the very woman you are looking for is deep inside of you. And to you women, the very man you are looking for is deep inside of you. We are the perfect one we have always been looking for. Why then do you continue to run naked all night long through every street in Ajijic looking for your mate? Okay. So God is hiding each other in us. Try to kiss the person beside you right now. I'll read that again. Try to kiss the person beside you right now without thoughts wildly and randomly flying up like frightened ducks in a marsh filled with thunder. Good work. Try to kiss the person beside you right now while God, in sensual form, is still hovering in your lips. Try to kiss the person beside you before God once again flies off to a foreign country. Try to do this right now. I mentioned about sacred books and things. This is starting. We no longer look for God in pieces of stale bread. You know, have to figure out what that refers to. Your hungry joke. We no longer look for God in pieces of stale bread, or in books so sacred that in fact they have no interest to us, or in old cathedrals filled with the mad and the dead. In our own time, God is hiding in relationships. God is secretly putting a fine piece of me into you, and a fine piece of you into me. There's nothing we can do about it now. It is beginning to become very obvious. We are all pregnant with each other. Me especially. We are all pregnant with each other. Okay, this is the origins of the universe. It's not the Carl Sagan version, although I think he's an interesting, wonderful guy. I read recently his theory that now the universe is not finite. We used to say it's finite, but it expanded as our equipment to perceive it expanded. And now Sagan has come out, or did, saying the universe is actually infinite. Well, if the universe is infinite, that's a real wild concept to get your brain around, for me. The day God started kissing God was the day the universe began. That was the day God and God, that doubly divine mouth, kissed into being the heavenly bodies. Would that we also could kiss divinity into this moment, as our lips swim toward each other, seeking no ship on the horizon, nor looking back at familiar shore. We must learn to kiss, expecting nothing further than our own sweet lips, our own sweet hearts, swelling in our lips to touch each other. When God started kissing God, the universe began. Who knows what will happen to us? When I was in Michigan teaching, occasionally teaching these in-service workshops for high school teachers on creative writing 30 years ago or so, I taught a 3-day class for creative writing for elementary school teachers to get additional certification or something. They all got presented with something. And we had a great time, and Interlochen Arts Academy. And they were mostly maybe 50 to 60 years old in that age range for the most part. And I think there was one man, all the other elementary teachers were women. Mm-hmm.
I said you were loud.
Yeah, so that was great. I thought, sign me up. And so at the end of our program, on the final day, I had everybody participate in chanting. I was doing some Sufi chanting and Sufi movements, and we were doing that common box song with the Sanskrit words set to it. You probably know. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. When you sing it 500 times, the same thing. Now, that is mantric chanting. Shri, incidentally, means reverend. Ram is the form of Hindu deity out of the dozens of them that is associated with the earth. That's what Gandhi says when he's shot in the park and falls to the ground. He says Ram. So Ram is the earth deity. Jai is praise. So that is a song saying praise life on earth. Let's try it a second. Shri, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. So these high school teachers from these little towns like Van Nuys, Michigan, were there exposed to this goofball sheep farmer beekeeper who wrote poems, and in that event, then at the end of it, I had us chant while moving in a circle and then doing some other movements. And then while the circle is still intact, I break from one of them and I start turning around like this. So they all wind tight around me, right? You follow me? And we're still chanting, Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. And we're doing this for half an hour or something. And they were really into it. And having such a wonderful time. This big mass hug. I was suffering so much. And then as we slowly started to part, one woman as part of that circle was crying her heart out. Tears were rolling down her face. And I said, Edna, are you okay? And she said, yes. She said, I just want to say, that's the first time in 10 years I've been hugged. That's the first time in 10 years I've been hugged. She'd never been married and didn't have children. First time in 10 years she'd been hugged. And that's what it did for her. So I, living in western Colorado, I wrote this poem. 10 minutes, wow. Time to begin the second half. So I thought I might read. We are gathered here tonight, as I mentioned, in western Colorado and in the mountains. We are gathered here tonight to organize, we could set it in Ajijic, the mountain rescue team. We are gathered here this morning in Ajijic to organize the mountain rescue team. This particular mountain rescue team will wander the mountains of the endless heart. Those who wish to be part of this team must know it will not be easy. There are people in these mountains who have been lost a long time. There are people in those mountains who have been looking for companions for a long time. Sometimes we will find a hermit there who never wished to be a hermit. For these searches we will travel light, knowing that on our back we must sometimes carry the mountain itself. Though we walk naked, we must always carry enough for two. What medicine we will need, we can carry inside of us. We know that kisses can heal. We know there is someone in this very room who has not been hugged in 10 years. I'll read two short ones and take over the questions, but I've explained everything so carefully I don't. Let's see. I thought I'd read a dog poem here for all the dogs in Ajijic.
All right.
Everybody knows. Everybody knows God spelled backwards is dog. But did you know that God likes to play? Did you know on some days God selects a dog in Ajijic to hide in? So it is very important to say buenos dias to every dog you meet. And for that moment, to look upon that dog with deep love, just to be safe. I got another 5 minutes? Okay, I'll end with this and then take a question if you have a question. Everybody's familiar with St. Francis of Assisi and St. Clare, his spiritual companion. San Francisco de Asís y Santa Clara se conocieron en una noche en una colina oscura y gozaron mucho al estar juntos. Tanta alegría en sus corazones llenos de amor de Dios. Entonces sus cuerpos empezaron a brillar hasta iluminar el cielo por kilómetros a la redonda. That's the opening of this in Spanish, but I know there's some people here who speak Spanish. Okay, St. Francis of Assisi and St. Clare met one night on a dark hill, and they felt much joy in being together. So much joy that their hearts filled with the love of God. This is talked about to this very day. This is a true event. This is talked about to this very day. So may our conversations on our own dark hill be filled so much with God that we also light up the sky, that we also might be talked about for 1,000 years. And I think I've run out of time for the moment. I happen to like that phrase, running out of time for the moment. Has a certain charm to it, doesn't it? And so I thought I'd end with these few lines. May you always be surrounded by love. May you always walk in sunshine. Remember the McGuire sisters, their song? May you always be surrounded by love. May you always walk in sunshine. And may the circle be unbroken. Happy Valentine's Day.
Okay, everybody, if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand and somebody will bring a mic and wait till the mic gets to you. Hold it close and you'll get your chance. Back here.
You're brilliant. Your roustabout wisdom is brilliant. I do have a question though. For you, does God hide in Playboy? In other words, does God hide in lust? Why are so many people condemnatory of lust as a divine reality for all of us?
Yeah, God does hide in lust. It's a good question. And lust being a variant in terms of relationships, God does hide in lust. Tantric Buddhism has a strong emphasis on the senses as the way to increase our connection with God. And so I think that lust as a human experience, if we are not coming at it through shadows of Puritanism or something, has a wonderful ability to bring us deeper to the divine. My phone number is what? Back here.
I love the way you cross boundaries between sexuality and relationship and love and spirituality and religion, and in a way breaking taboo. And I wonder if you would speak to courage in finding God outside the books, the churches.
Yeah, I think the more people are doing that, the more momentum is building. And so, Christianity in the United States is much on the wane, partly because they politicize themselves too much. And that messed stuff up a lot. You do have this possibility lurking inside of Christianity that I'm talking about. But I think that to live our own lives does take courage, and most of us would like to do a better job of living our own lives, I think. And so that's always a courageous act. People told Thoreau that he should write more about his own life and do more writing. And he said, my life is the book I would have written, but I could not both live and utter it. My life is the book I would have written. And so for many of you, your life is the book you would have written. And striding forth with courage and boldness and faith in a way different from the faith we grew up thinking about. I think it's so incredibly important. The more we live our own lives, the more love opens up inside of us, does it not? You've had that experience, haven't you? The more we live our own lives, the more the world seems to open up.
Over here.
I've always had a sort of compulsive interest in words. We use words all the time and really aren't curious enough to know what they really mean.
Yeah.
Who knows what God means?
Yeah.
We use the word God all the time.
Yeah.
God
Yeah.
comes from the German,
Yeah.
Gott.
Yeah.
And what does God come from?
Yeah.
Good.
Good.
Which is God is good.
Uh-huh.
I suggest that God is in lust.
Yeah, that's good too.
Lust must be
So good.
good.
Tricky.
You know, the Eskimos have, like my grade, they have like 40 words for snow. You ever read that, haven't you? as we increasingly work in the love culture, it seems to me we might end up developing, why don't we have 40 words for love? You know, variations and things that help us understand this at a deeper level. Other questions?
Nope, that's it.
That's it.
Sorry. Jim will be here if you want to talk to him. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Dudley.
I do have a couple dozen of these books available outside the entrance. My friend,
Books available outside the entrance.
100 pages.
Jim's book. So if you'd like to
Everything I read is on this
purchase
book.
a DVD, you're welcome to. You can see Roy Nolan. You can also go on the website. Thank you for being here. Turn on your cell phone.